The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Visit marketingcollege.com to see our courses.
Hello and welcome to a brand new show to star, The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing College. The show is about every aspect of marketing with a particular emphasis on how to do it. I'm your host, Kiran Kapur, and coming up on the show, Peter Fisk, a marketing guru talking about the new generation of businesses. Dawn Southgate from the Chartered Institute of Marketing giving us 3 books that all marketers should read. And Steve Bax, a local marketing research expert, will be talking on how to do online marketing research.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges.
So first, to Peter Fisk. Peter is the founder of GeniusWorks, a business innovation consultancy. He's the author of 6 books on marketing, and last year he became inducted into the Thinkers 50 Guru list, which identified him as one of the world's top 50 thinkers about new business. His new book is Game Changers, about a new generation of businesses. Peter, could you explain what Game Changers, the concept is?
I guess if you look around the world today, you see a new generation of companies, and these are the companies who are embracing change which is quite dramatic and discontinuous. If you look at the years from 2010 to 2020, there's a massive hike in population across the world from 57 to 90 billion people. But more importantly than that, there's a new generation of middle-class people who have new expectations, new aspirations. And these companies are catering to those companies and, if you like, thinking like those companies as well. I call them the speedboats. They're the companies who are zigging in and out of the waters and seeking the new opportunities and embracing the change, and they're moving fast and agile, while the old companies, the supertankers, plough ahead in the same old directions and find it hard to change.
So if as a business I was interested in becoming a speedboat, what sort of things should I be thinking about doing?
Well, I guess speedboats have the agility to zoom across the world and find the best opportunities wherever they might be. So they're not hindered by capabilities which they have in the past. So the old thinking of business was that we do what we always did and we perhaps try to do it a bit better. They look for the opportunities in the market first and say, yes, I can see there's a new trend there, or I can see there's a profit pool, as we call it, over there, and I want to find a way of harnessing that. And I'm going to find partners who bring the capabilities together in order to do that. I guess Tony Fernandez is a good example of that, and he read C.K. Pralahad's book, which says that there's a billion people at the bottom of the pyramid who are worth $5 trillion potentially if you can tap into them. And so he said, where are these billion people? And he found some of them across in Kuala Lumpur and starting to travel because they now had enough money to do so between the different countries of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Philippines and so on. So he set up Air Asia. He knew nothing about airlines. He didn't have any airlines, but he found partners, including Richard Branson, who could help him to create the fleet and the routes and the hubs and all the technology which goes with running an airline. And so he spots the opportunity, and then he finds the partners to make it happen.
So where do businesses go to get these new ideas?
Well, I guess it depends on the people who are in the organizations. Today, I guess we're kind of an ideas economy where it's not about being slightly better in terms of the quality of your product or slightly better in terms of your price than the competition. It's actually about outthinking the competition. When consumers or business customers are faced with a choice which is global and endless in many ways, then you have to do something quite different to stand out. And if you take a leaf out of Google's book, they have a factory down the road from their Google complex. It's called the Moonshots Factory. And what they believe is that rather than just doing things 10% better, it's about doing things 10 times better. So having the audacity to be able to think in a bigger way, which doesn't actually require much more effort, but to think in a more radical, disruptive way in order to think, how can I seize perhaps a different category, seize a different audience, or maybe acquire new assets and partners with those assets so that I can do things. It's not about businesses going to find it, it's about businesses being the game changers, and leaders in particular have a new mentality so that they can go and find these opportunities and then move their organizations forward to seize them.
So you've given me some examples of some quite big companies. We had Air Asia there and Google. Is this something that really big companies should be doing, or is it something smaller companies can do as well?
I think the really exciting thing is that it's as much applicable to small as big companies. So small companies have the speed and agility to be able to move fast, to leave an old market behind and to move to a new place, maybe a new geographical region or maybe a new category, so they have less baggage, if you like, whilst big companies have enormous scale and a range of different assets and partner power, if you like, by which they can seize these opportunities in different ways. So it's about playing to your strengths. It's a bit like judo in some ways. Whether you're small or you're big, you play to your strengths in different ways in order to seize the opportunities for you.
Can you give me some examples of how some small businesses have done this?
Fabulous example is actually 23andMe. This is a US company. And Anne Wojcicki was a genetics research scientist. And what she believed was that the way in which people were starting to profile DNA was something which could be done much cheaper and faster if you got the business model right. And by business model, we mean the way in which the company works and how it works with partners and how it earns its money, where its revenue comes from. And what she found was that by being able to create a slightly different model, where you were able to take a sample from somebody of their DNA, so for example, spit into a tube, send it in the post, she was able to create a lab which was able to turn around your DNA profile within 1 day, and then send it back to you with a profile as to what your health outcomes might look like in the future, and therefore how you could adjust your diet and lifestyle to respond to that. But also quite interesting and emotional for people is where they come from. So what's your genetic makeup? And in a world where ancestry matters more too, then people are engaged in that. And she started off by charging $9,000 for that. But quickly she found a model where many people couldn't pay $9,000, couldn't even pay $900. And she found that by being able to charge $99 to the consumer, she was able to aggregate the data into a form which then was able to be sold to drug companies and insurance companies who would pay a premium for that data because it was personal, it was detailed to a level which they'd never seen before. So she created this multi-revenue-based model which benefits 3 different industries in some ways, and from the consumer's point of view, you can have this phenomenal understanding of yourself like you never did before. Now that's a company with 7 people in it, so the ability for small companies to seize opportunities and, if you like, to create their own space in an incredibly busy, crowded, complex, intriguing world is phenomenal today.
So as a small business, I take your point about 23andMe having a multi-revenue stream. So they've taken the revenue from one area which allows them to do something else. And I think that's a very interesting model to take forward.
Yep.
How does a small business actually stand out from the crowd? How do they come up with these new revenue streams?
Again, it's about thinking. It's about thinking, how can I seize that opportunity? And then what's a different type of model for being able to do it? So a great example is the emergence of the collaborative consumer. And the collaborative consumer is the person who prefers to share things rather than buy things outright. And I'm sure many of us can identify with going out and buying all sorts of DIY tools for our homes, such as drills and saws and other things, which we use once and then probably put away in the shed and use again once 5 years, 10 years later. Now, instead of having to go and buy that and spend the $100, $200 in terms of buying it, then let's go out and just rent it for $5 from somebody down the street. And a company like Zillock is one of these companies which anybody can go and they can say, I've got my drill for rent, I've got my saw for rent, or I've got my car for rent, or I've got my yacht for rent, or whatever it might be. Whatever you have in your home, whatever you own, you could rent it. And then other people who, when they need that, maybe they need a car for an hour, or maybe they need to drill for the day, can go and rent it at a very low cost. And then if you scale that up, you can see companies like Airbnb, which is 2 guys in a dormitory in an American university saying, hey, what about all these spare bedrooms all across the world? What if people started to lease their spare bedrooms? And not only do you get a way in which people can make money from their spare bedrooms, but for the intrepid traveler across the world, you have somewhere far more interesting to stay overnight than in one of these sterile standard grey hotels, which most of us end up in. So that's a great example of a changing business model, a changing consumer need, brought together in a way which allows small businesses to do things which perhaps they could never do before.
I know you have a website, gamechangers.pro, which has a number of your case studies on there. One of the case studies you talk about on there is a local firm doing Raspberry Pi.
Yep.
Could perhaps we explore that one a bit further?
Okay, so on gamechangers.pro, you'll find 120 companies which we've researched, and each one of these were nominated by other companies in their sector to say, I think that kind of company is shaking up our world. So companies in technology, for example, all over the world, including Apple and Motorola and Vodafone and so on, we asked them, who do you think's shaking up the world? And one of the 10 companies which they came up with was a company in Cambridge, UK, called Raspberry Pi. And Raspberry Pi is a phenomenal little company, developed out the computer science department of Cambridge University, and led by a team with a guy called Eben Upton. What they said was that we really want to get young people in particular excited about computing, the raw ingredients of computing again, how to do coding, how computers are actually made with the semiconductors and the transistors, and get people to start making things with these computers rather than just buying pre-assembled tablets and laptops. And so what they did was to set up the Raspberry Pi Foundation, which they launched in 2009, and over the last 2 years, they've sold over 1 million units of what's called a Raspberry Pi computer. And this isn't something which costs £2,000 or £200. This is something which you can buy for less than £20. And it's a very simple circuit board, which is the essence of a computer, from which you can start to build your own gadgets and contraptions. So you could power a printer, you could power a small, mobile device or a toy even. So it's giving people the ability to create their own things, but giving them that little computer, which is often the starting point. And in many ways, it's going back to the days of when computers first appeared, like the ZX Spectrum for another Cambridge grandee, Clive Sinclair, where people would take them apart to see what they're made of. And that's what Eben Upton and his team's trying to get back to. So a phenomenal little company, which has a business model again, which is a non-profit actually. They're a non-profit company, which is exciting children through clubs in schools across the UK, across Europe, across the world even, to get re-excited and re-educated about actually what makes computers work and what they can do with them.
Peter Fisk, thank you so much for joining us and discussing Game Changers. And as I said, all information is available on gamechangers.pro, and there'll be links to that from the Star Radio website. Peter, thank you.
Thank you.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Enhance your career with Cambridge Marketing Colleges.
And now we move on to our book review slot, and I'm joined by Dawn Southgate from the Chartered Institute of Marketing. Dawn is the head of information and sees many books across her desk. So Dawn, did I give you a difficult task choosing just 3 books?
Oh, definitely. We see so many good marketing books each month that, quite difficult, but I've managed to hone it down to 3 for you. 3 books I've picked. There's one masterclass on current marketing practice, one brush up to social skills, and a bonus one, but there's more of that later. The masterclass I've picked is 15 Essential Marketing Masterclasses for Your Small Business by Dee Blick. It's useful for any entrepreneur, small business owner or practicing marketer. It gives practical steps on an array of marketing topics, including marketing planning, communications, copywriting and social media. Dee is a successful author and marketing guru who's been working with small businesses for over 27 years, so she has quite a lot to offer. She enlists the help of renowned experts on some chapters to give the most up-to-date information, and the really good thing is each topic is taken in isolation, so you can dip into the book at any point, although Dee does suggest reading Masterclass 1 on marketing planning first. There are case studies and examples throughout the book to illustrate learning outcomes that are clearly stated. I think this is really good because, yes, it is for small business owners, but just as a marketer myself, I found some really interesting examples that can be used as examples when I'm doing presentations or when I'm talking to members in the library. Dee does include improving your website and use of LinkedIn and Twitter. But once your company starts using these routes to your audience, you'll need to monitor more closely what is being said about you. Delivering effective social customer service will help you understand the impact that social media can have on your reputation. Customers may use social media as their first choice in communicating with you, and I'm sure you can all think of examples where that's happened. This book develops the idea of Facebook and Twitter as service channels and how you can align your PR, marketing and customer service around this. The book is clearly laid out, and the first couple of chapters give you an overview. Chapter 3, the building blocks, and then Chapter 4 brings in the 15 competencies you need to excel. Chapters 5 to 7 develop better understanding of channels, and Chapters 8 and 9 are the ubiquitous chapters on crisis management. There are interviews throughout to add illustrative points. The bonus book is Hit Brands, How Music Builds Value for the World's Smartest Brands. This is an area we've struggled to find good material on before. The writers are all ensconced in the global music and branding industries, adding real-life examples all the way through the book. Music is a powerful tool for brands, and brands can be a powerful tool for musicians. This title covers the history of the relationship, how musicians are using social media, music as identity, and music as an engagement tool. There are chapters of case studies including Nescafe, Barclaycard, Nokia, and no book on music and branding would be there without Coca-Cola, teaching the world to sing. This is an important book for understanding why music is powerful, not just that it is powerful. There are some really interesting facts in the book, including the top 8 Twitter users, listed at this point as Lady Gaga with 30.5 million followers, then Justin Bieber with 29 million, although of course it could be a few more or a few less after his exploits, Katy Perry, Rihanna, Brittany, and then the first non-musician, Barack Obama, with 21 million, followed by Taylor Swift and Shakira. The other interesting fact is that the top YouTube views was Psy with the Gangnam Style with, and I think I've got this right, 1,238 million views, which I just find is an extortionate amount. And that was followed by Lady Gaga with Bad Romance at 505 million, just a paltry viewing.
Dawn, thank you so much for 3 really interesting books there. As you said, one how-to, one very specific on customer service, and one slightly off-the-wall one, which I've now singing, I heard it on the grapevine in my head, so I'm sure other people have their own favourite music for brands. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem, thanks.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Visit marketingcollege.com to see our courses.
My studio guest today is Steve Bax, founder of Baxinteraction, which is a Cambridge-based marketing research consultancy. Steve, you are a marketing research guru, and you've recently published a research handbook. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Would you like to tell me some of the things that Baxinteraction are currently working on?
Yes, thank you, Kiran. We're currently working on a research project for a local manufacturing company, and they manufacture products for data centres. And we're doing some qualitative and quantitative research for them. Recently, we've undertaken some training for a large local company, and we're also doing audit work and strategy work for a local private school. And in terms of more research side of things, we've done some research for the Cambridge Marketing College, and also in recent times for the National Health Service. So those are just some of the projects we've been working on.
So quite a varied client base then.
Yes, interesting client base, I think.
Now, I asked you to come on specifically to talk about how to do online market research, because it's a question that lots of companies are interested in. But you were listening to the Peter Fisk interview, and he was talking a lot about the importance of understanding a marketplace. So I wondered if you had any views on that.
Yes, I think Peter's talk was very interesting, and I think it highlights the need to undertake some research, because it's lovely to come up with all of these new ideas in terms of how you might model or structure your business, but you need to test whether that works. And that's what marketing research is all about, is finding out whether or not the customer or potential customer sees the same things that you do and values the way that you structure it in the same way that perhaps you think they should, but also that you're coming up with the right products and services for them. It's fine to look at all these new ideas and look at collaboration, but the consumer has got to buy into that. The consumer has got to identify, and you've got to be able to match their needs as well as the ideas that you have. And I think that highlights a key point of marketing research for me, I think, is that in order to stay ahead, in order to position yourself within the marketplace, You've got to test the products and services that you're thinking about introducing. You've got to know your market. So you need to get a good insight in terms of how the customers behave, how they think, what they think about you, what they think about the ideas that you have. All very, very important. And that, fundamentally, that's about being successful.
Yes, I was quite interested in Peter's idea about collaborative consumers, and he was talking about the idea of car sharing. Now, maybe that would work in a UK market, but I must admit my view was first thing in the morning, the last thing I want is somebody else in my car.
Yes, we don't see too many people car sharing on the A10 or the A14 in the morning, I don't think. Certainly around the Cambridge area anyway. I think it's a lovely idea, and I think some people completely buy into that. It doesn't work for everybody, and I think that again highlights the importance of research, is to understand which segments are going to suit those ideas and then really targeting on that. And I think Peter alluded to that. He talked about finding out these 1 billion at the bottom of the pyramid and looking at where they are. But that goes a step further, doesn't it, in terms of which segments are they in, which classes they're in. And he was talking about this, the changing consumer and, the new generation of middle class. Well, it's a bigger picture, isn't it, than that in terms of segmentation. It's right down to ages and where people live and the people that they interact with and the sort of communications that they will participate and interact with. So it's a much bigger picture, I think, than just looking at, class and those sort of structures.
Okay, so if I was a small business and I sat down and I wanted to do some research, where would I start?
I think research tends to go in 3 phases, and we talk about triangulating research, which of course probably sounds like jargon, but the thing to do is to look at something called secondary research first. And secondary research is information, data that has already been gathered and exists somewhere, and it was collected for some other purpose, and that's really important. So the first thing a small business can do is actually look at what information is available, what desk reports, for example, might be available. What can they find on the internet? A short internet search, even just going into Google and searching for keywords and words that are associated with the things that a small business does. Look at who the competition are. Look at who else is playing in that market, for example. What do other people within the business know? What do the people that the business interacts with, the customers, the potential customers, the people they associate with, know about that marketplace? There's a lot you can gather from gathering secondary information. So that's the first thing to do. So before you do anything else, before you spend an awful lot of money, find out what already exists. Go to the library. Talk to your trade association. Explore all the avenues that are open to you, but most importantly, explore the people within your own organisation first. Ask them, what do they think? What do they know? What have they got in the garage? What have they picked up? What exhibitions have they been to? What events have they been to? Who else have they seen? So there's a lot that already exists. Once you've done that, then the next step really is to do what we call qualitative research, and this is research that looks at views, opinions, perceptions, if you like, the soft issues that people have, the way people feel, the way people think.
So I think this is when people are talking about market research, this is probably what they sort of expect market research to be, the people that stop you with clipboards and ask you questions. Is that the sort of thing?
I'm not sure it's even that. I mean, from a small business point of view, it's talking to your customers, talking to your potential customers and asking them some open questions. What do you think about us? How would you describe us to somebody else that didn't know us? Those sort of very basic questions that are very open. What, how, who, when, why. Those sort of starts to questions are invaluable for a small business just to ask their customers. And you can get somebody else to do that, but it costs money. As a small business, particularly at the early stages, you can do it yourself. What do you think about this? So it's just taking that step away from the day-to-day and asking your customer, asking your potential customer, what they think about your ideas. We're thinking about launching this, to come back to some of Peter's comments earlier. We're thinking about launching this new product, this new idea. We're thinking about positioning it in this way, doing a rental-based operation, for example. What do you think? It's that simple. What do you think? And sometimes it's as simple as that. So that's where you start. Once you've gathered those parameters and you understand something about the way that your customers and potential customers think, you can then do your online research. Sorry, Kiran, it's taken a while to get to that. But that is the third part of it, really.
So when you said triangulating, this is the third part of the triangle?
This is the third part of the triangle. So we're looking at what exists, and that's called secondary. And then we're looking at finding out the parameters of things. In other words, people's views, perceptions, opinions. And that's the qualitative side. They're very hard to quantify, those things. I think this particular company is very good at X, Y. It's hard to quantify that. And then we use those things to come up with some online research or some quantitative research. And this is about research that puts numbers to things. So it could be a percentage of people that like something. It could be a number. It could be a market share. It could be a value. Could be a ranking. I think this company is better than that company, for example. So it's all about putting number to something and giving it a statistical basis.
So when we see adverts that say 8 out of 10, I was going to say 8 out of 10 cats prefer it because that was the old line, but 8 out of 10 users like this. Does that come out of quantitative research?
That comes out of quantitative research. And what quantitative research means is number. It's about quantity. So it's giving a number to something. So many people, so many cats prefer whatever it is.
Okay.
Yes.
So as a business, if I've done the secondary, I've talked to some of my customers. Now I've decided, okay, I'm ready for the next bit. What steps do I do? How do I actually put this together? Where do I go?
I think as a small business, your next step is probably likely to be online. That's where you started, Kiran, with the questioning. You can do quantitative research in the high street, which you mentioned. You can do it with a postal-based questionnaire. You can do it at exhibitions and events and conferences, on tablets and standalone PCs and so on and so on. But most small businesses will tend to favour the online route. And the reason for that is that it's relatively low cost. It's easy to distribute, it's easy to analyse if you use questionnaire-based software such as SurveyMonkey. Those sorts of products are relatively easily available. If you just want to ask up to 10 questions, SurveyMonkey is free, for example. So you could ask some very key questions of customers and potential customers with, relatively no cost apart from time in terms of putting it together.
And is something like SurveyMonkey, and there are other products available, easy to use?
Very easy to use. SurveyMonkey has templates available so that if you're not used to designing questionnaires, you can use them. I would advocate you to think a little bit further than those as a small business, so make them a little bit more relevant, perhaps tailor them that little bit more. And that's where you might want to get the advice of somebody like us. In other words, you might want to come to us to get some help with designing the questionnaire, for example, because questionnaire design is very, very important. And it will directly affect the responses that you get.
Can you give me an example of the sort of responses that I might get?
For an online questionnaire? If you're targeting your customers and if it's well designed and you've thought about incentivising it, for example, perhaps a prize draw for a hamper or something of that nature, then you're likely to get at least around the sort of 20% mark of existing customers, I would think. If you're just targeting potential customers and it's relatively lacking in incentivisation, in other words, why should I do this, isn't particularly clear, then it could be less than 10% quite easily. For example, for the college we targeted the alumni and we had a 54% response rate.
Are there any pitfalls I should avoid? Is this the sort of thing that if I'm going to do it, I've got to do it well?
Yes, I really think it is. It is a reflection on you and the organisation that you're doing the research for, particularly if you're doing it yourself. So poor design is a pitfall to avoid. And the way to avoid it and to keep the costs down as a small business, you can do it yourself, as we've already mentioned. And one of the key ways to avoid the design pitfall is to test it. And I strongly advocate that you get a friendly customer, get some of your colleagues to just pilot test the survey before it goes out. Share it with as many people as you can before you push it out to a sample or all of your customer base, depending on how big your customer base is. The other, which I think is absolutely vital, is to decide very clearly what it is you want to find out. The classic research problem is that the minute somebody within the organisation knows that a bit of research is going to be done, they go, why don't we ask them this? Why don't we ask them that? And I call that the kitchen sink approach. In other words, let's throw absolutely everything into it and see what we get out of it. It's far better to be very focused. In other words, to discover what they think about your service, to discover what they think about this new product idea, to discover what they think about your new business model. In other words, be very focused about what the research needs to deliver. And you'll find, A, you'll get a better response, B, you'll get a better set of insight and understanding from it. Other things to think about are things like sampling. Do we need to send the questionnaire to everybody? If you've got a reasonably sizable customer and prospect base, then you probably don't, and you can use sampling techniques to reduce the volume of surveys that go out. And that can make your life easier, certainly makes your customers' lives easier, because you're not continually bombarding all of them with a multitude of surveys. So do think about sampling. But probably the most important thing out of all of that is to really decide what decision you need to take. What information do you actually need to make that decision? And until you've done that, don't do anything.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Just before we finish, could I ask for your sort of top 3 tips?
Yeah, back to what I was saying, really. I suppose my first would be to decide exactly what decision it is that you need to take. So that would be one, and allied to that is the shopping list. I call this thing the shopping list. In other words, what things do you need to get in your bag of information at the end? That is the shopping list. And once you've decided on that, you can then come up with the questions and the responses that you need to put in within your questionnaire. You need to design the questionnaire effectively. You need to test it. That's my number 2 tip. If you're unsure on questionnaire design, then get some help. You know, even if you just get some help on that part, it will pay huge benefits to you in terms of the responses you get, the quality of the information, and therefore, let's be blunt about it, the decisions that you can take. That's number 2. The third, and perhaps it really ought to be the first, is to get buy-in. In other words, get the support of whoever is going to make the decision. In other words, if you think, perhaps as the marketer, let's say, for a small business, that you should do some research, but your MD doesn't think it is a good idea, what's going to happen at the end of it? And the problem is that you're going to get all this good research and no decision is going to be taken. My advice to you, if that is the case, is to use the money and go and have a lunch somewhere. Yeah, because there is no point in doing the research if you're not going to get the decision at the end of the day.
That sounds like sound advice, Steve. Thank you so much for giving us the benefit of your expertise.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Enhance your career with Cambridge Marketing Colleges.
And that's it for the Marketing Review. If you would like any more information, or you'd like to listen to the show again, or you'd like details of the books and websites that we've talked about, then head over to star107.co.uk, where you can do just that. Next time, we will be joined by a social marketing expert to talk about how businesses can do social marketing, and also by a local firm doing international distribution of luxury chocolates. But for now, I've been your host, Kiran Kapur. Many thanks for listening, and I'll catch you again in 2 weeks' time.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Visit marketingcollege.com to see our courses.